The Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return, sponsored by Narconon Ojai.
Hello, and welcome to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. My name is Joni Siegel, and I'm the host for this podcast. Today's episode is episode number 208. We have completed the end of our fourth year with this podcast episode, and I would just like to thank you so much for listening. You know, when a person is suffering from addiction to drugs and or alcohol, there are lots of different treatment choices available, and it can be overwhelming. And oftentimes there's a revolving door. Our sponsor, Narconon Ojai, is a residential treatment facility, very exclusive in Ojai, California, and they address the physical, mental, and spiritual aspects of addiction. They have a drug-free, holistic, evidence-based, step-by-step program that is designed to free those trapped by addiction. If you're tired of that revolving door for yourself or for your loved ones, call 1-866-231-5924. Today we have an interview with a husband and wife team, Jeannie and Marcus Marshall. They are co-founders of Keys to Recovery Newspaper Incorporated. They both have their own background of addiction. They are both in recovery, and now they're giving back through their newspaper, which is proving to be a lifeline for a lot of people. So without further ado, let's talk to Jeannie and Marcus Marshall. So Jeannie and Marcus Marshall, I want to thank you both for being willing to share your stories on the podcast. You know, not everybody's willing to do that, so I appreciate it when people do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Marcus, I apologize, but I believe in ladies first. So
Absolutely.
Jeannie, if you could tell, how did you get started with drugs? Give us your drug history.
Okay, well, I started very early. I don't remember the exact date, the time, the drug. I had two older brothers that were using and dealing drugs, so it was just kind of natural. And I grew up in the projects, so that was just the norm. Everybody drank and everybody used. That doesn't mean everybody was an addict, but or an alcoholic, but it was very available and very normal. Nobody looked down on it. So as early as I can remember, I was using. I think when I really started it affecting my life, I was probably 12 or 13. And that was, I liked anything that would take me out of myself completely, any downers. And back in the 70s, there was a big time when PCP was available, and I used PCP so much that it didn't affect me. It made me normal. When I would just use a little bit, I'd get normal, but I would have these, I call them gray outs, because I would believe that it was a dream, So when you think you're dreaming, you do things that you wouldn't normally do. And I believe that that's why a lot of people got really crazy on angel dust, PCP. But that was my drug of choice. I also like the Tuinals and the Quaaludes, things that don't even exist anymore, And I found out early if I used like a little bit of alcohol with the pills, I would get a much better high for a very cheap price. And I was so young, I think the first thing, like when I getting drugs was actually easier because, like I said, my brothers were dealing drugs, and alcohol was actually harder for me to get. That's when you had to stand in front of the liquor store and beg people to go in and buy it for you. Right. Or, and people would ask me, what was your favorite drink? I said, whatever was closest to the door, because I would grab it and run. It was usually like cheap vodka. So, I wasn't, I just used everything that I could get my hands on. And what I wanted to do was stop the feelings. And I didn't know that at the time. I thought I was just being cool, and I was just, doing something I wanted to do. Everybody that I was associated with also used drugs and alcohol. We lived in Pacoima, which was at that time predominantly Black neighborhood. And my nickname was the white girl, not white girl, but the white girl, you know, and the junior high. And, you know, and as much, you know, I loved the attention of being totally different, but I also didn't know what to do with all that attention. Like I did everything to get everyone's attention. It was like, look at me, look at me, look at me. And then everyone's looking at me. I'm like, what are they? Stop it, you know? Don't. But yeah, I would give, and I was very violent. And I think that was a lot of fear. I was very, very quick to fight people. You know, I was very quick to be physical. But, you know, so I just, that was my experience young. You know, I got sober the first time when I was 18. So I burned fast, you know.
Jeannie, do you think, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but do you think that, you know, you getting violent, do you think that some of that might have been attributed to drug use?
It was, but it was also the environment. You know, everybody I knew fought. My brothers actually, it was funny because the local police station, Foothill Division, they were doing like this outreach for, you know, troubled youths, right? So they got the boys together and they taught them how to box, and then they would box the different divisions, and we would go around, and it did divert us. It did keep them off the streets a little bit, but it wasn't something that they went into 100%, but it was a great effort on the police departments. But, you know, but also, so I learned how to fight, you know, and I remember my younger brother, he would be like, you know, don't scratch, don't slap, punch people, you know, so I kind of grew up like,
don't fight like a girl, Jeannie.
Exactly. If you're gonna fight to win, you know? So, you know, that was, and plus I had a lot of anger that I didn't know how to deal with. You know what, growing up, we never talked about feelings. Nobody ever asked me, how do you feel? Never heard that. So when I got sober and people were like, how do you feel? I'm like, I didn't even know what a feeling was. I remember my sponsor, she goes, well, what are you feeling right now? Maybe make a sound. I was like, She goes, right. And she was like, okay, let's start with, you know, that we'll start with that. Because, you know, in the environment that I grew up in, and Marcus also grew up in Pacoima, you know, we didn't sit around and share feelings. Nobody did. Right. You know, but you also, you know, it's like if your cousin or your uncle or your dad wasn't there or in prison, there was no shame to that. So, you know, there was, you know, benefits of growing up in an environment like that. But then, you know, I didn't have a real feeling or process a real feeling until I got sober and in therapy.
Wow. And you said that the first time you got sober, you said, was it 18?
Right. Right before I got sober, I had a intentional, it wasn't suicide attempt. I don't know. A lot of people that are drug addicts might understand or might relate. I just wanted some attention. You know what I mean? My boyfriend was a heroin addict and he was not paying enough attention to me. And he went to the store and I had like 20 Tuinals, which is a fatal overdose. And I thought, well, I'll take them. I'll tell him what I did when he gets back. He'll walk in and he'll rush me to the hospital for the 100th time, right? And they'll pump my stomach and he'll realize he almost lost me and that he loves me and we'll live happily ever after. Well, he was
good plan, Jeannie. Good plan.
Right? It was like, it didn't really get up in my head, but you know, the afternoon special, you know?
Yeah.
But what happened is he stayed away longer than I thought he was going to. And so the pills kicked in and I overdosed. And when he came in, he found me on the ground in my own vomit, which he found me like that a lot. So he wasn't concerned. He was kind of disgusted and left. And thank goodness I had vomited some of that, or I believe that I would have died. You know, what happened was that I had such a severe overdose. And by the time, I'm sorry, my mom came looking for me. And because, you know, I was missing and she came looking for me. I was about 17 and she had heard through the grapevine that I was staying at this one place. She came over and she put me in the tub. But by the time she found me, the drugs were already in. She took me to the hospital. I said, there's nothing we can do. It's too late. So basically I was alive, but I had some pretty severe brain damage, which I believe was God stepping into my life and saying, okay, honey, enough. Because at that point, I could think, but I wasn't very rational. I couldn't concentrate. I was slurring. I was I was stumbling around. I was stuttering. And but I knew what was going on around me. I was just having some motor skill problems. But I believe that at that moment, my world was split wide open. That was my divine intervention where God came in and just said, okay, now you're going to hear it. Now you're low enough right now. And what happened is a girlfriend of mine called and she said, I have to go to this meeting or my mom's going to kick me out of the house. And I said, okay. And she goes, I'll give you a ride, we'll eat. And I'm like, okay, I'll go. And then she said, I go, well, what kind of meeting? She goes, well, there's a lot of sober people. And I was like, I don't think, it's like, I'm on the verge of death, but yeah, I don't want to be around sober people.
Boring.
Right. And she said, there's a lot of good looking guys there. And I thought, okay. So for you, I'm going to do this for you. So I went, and then plus my head is thinking, sober guys are not drinking. They're not using drugs. They got to be sitting on a shitload of cash. Right. But that's what I thought. So I went to the meeting, and I got to tell you that I believe that I was open to anything at that moment. And when I walked into that meeting and those people, they just surrounded me with love. They smelled good. They were shiny. They had all their teeth, and the people that I was hanging out with, including myself, missing a few, and these are all due to sobriety. Nice, pretty smile. But, the thing is that for the first time in my life, I was open to the love that was being extended to me. And these people were all sober and they were really young. It wasn't an AA meeting. It was a Palmer drug abuse program that had come from Texas, and it was all younger people. And, of course, I also went to AA meetings, but that was my first meeting. And they kind of like surrounded me, and they had a newcomers meeting where anyone who was brand new, they took out and they told you about the 12 steps, about getting a big book, about getting a sponsor, and what a sobriety date was and what sobriety was. Nothing, no drugs, no alcohol, no this, no that, no sleeping pills, no,
Right.
I was like, oh, okay. And so I remember just in that moment, just being struck sober, I was like, okay, where do I sign? What do I do? And I had no withdrawals. Which was crazy because I was using every day, and I had that, like I told you, think of someone who's so disoriented that they would take 20 pills just to get their boyfriend's attention. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I was just kind of scooped up and moved by this. It was incredible. And they didn't want anything. It's a little story. Who came to be my sponsor, she said, well, we're all going to go out to coffee afterwards. And, we just talk, and then I'm going to go to my house. And I said, that's great. I said, you know what? I'm straight. And she said, so am I, honey. So am I. Because I wasn't used to anybody being so sweet to me for no reason at all, especially a woman. Why would she want to be so nice to me? There had to be a motive. And yet she was my first example of unconditional love in the program. It was absolutely, that was my first day sober when I was 18.
Wow. And you've been sober ever since, right?
No.
Oh.
I got sober. I, did a lot of stuff. I got well. I got married, had a baby, or I got pregnant, got married, had a baby, got a job working in Beverly Hills. And I thought, I'm doing good. Then me and my husband split up. I had the baby. I was a single mom. Life was good. And I went to therapy. I got in touch with my inner child. And I thought, you know what? This was a phase. Who can be an addict and alcoholic at 18? It's just not possible. I was just going through a phase. I came from a dysfunctional family. When I first got sober, I couldn't even pronounce that word, right? So I was with someone who, we call a normie, someone who didn't have, who wasn't an addict. And he was like, baby, you're the most together woman I've ever met. You don't need those meetings. And so I stopped going to my meetings, and we had a party one night it was like a regular party, like adults have, with just some beer and shrimp scampi. prior to that, my parties had been backyards, kegs, nothing, people running around naked. It was, so this was like an adult regular party. And I drank and I smoked a little bit of pot. And the next day I woke up and I was okay. I was like, oh, I can do this, 3.5 weeks later, I was in the bathroom shooting up reds. Oh. And he was on the outside door banging, saying, baby, I think you need to go back to your meetings, And so, yeah. And so then I got sober again. It took about a year, but then I got sober again, mostly because of my daughter.
Yeah. And you said you've been sober 35 years, right?
At the end of this month, on the 28th, it'll be 35 years sober.
Well, very well done. That's not easy. We've talked to enough former addicts that we know it's not easy. And, every day you got to take a win that you are clean and sober.
That's right. That's right.
So, Marcus, I'm putting you on the spot now.
Yes.
I want to hear about you. Tell me about your drug story, and then y'all can circle back and tell me how you met and didn't meet and met again.
I'm part of in his story when he's using, and it makes me look bad, but if I chime in.
Okay.
Okay, baby.
Fair enough. No judgment.
As Jeannie was saying, I was born in Pacoima as well. And I was born in 1960. And at that time, it was a lot of civil unrest. And of course, racism and everything was very prevalent. My mother is German and Jewish. My father was African-American and Indian. And Pacoima was predominantly Black at that time. So in our neighborhood, we were considered outcasts. The women didn't like my mother because she was a beautiful woman. And they were contemplating that their husbands are probably gonna try to sneak over or whatever. My father they were calling her race traitor, calling my father race traitor, calling me and my siblings, despicable, mistakes, all these things growing up I heard. But my mother was a very devout Christian. So she always told us that just love them no matter what. Mm-hmm. And that's what we did. So their kids, unfortunately, was taught by the parents to not associate with us. So all through elementary, all the way up to the 5th grade, we were sort of segregated from them. And I was trying to be friends, but then when the kids got to a certain age, they realized that Marcus was not a bad guy. Regardless of what moms and pops is telling me, I'm gonna still be friends. So I started acquiring friends about 5th, 6th grade. In the 7th grade, I was trying to hurry up and go to school because I was going to church very much at that time. And my friends that I considered friends at that time was across the street. And they were behind an abandoned church. And I knew what they were doing. They were smoking weed. I didn't want no parts of it. So I was trying to get by them. And they said, Marcus, come over here. So, because of peer pressure and all that, because I succumbed to that because I just wanted to fit in. I went back there and, I let them talk me into it. And I smoked some weed. And this is in the 7th grade. I was 12 years old. And then in the 8th grade, I started drinking. And subsequently, I did that continually all the way to I got with Jeannie. I was 19 years old when Jeannie and I got together. That was in 1979. And we were both getting high, drinking, but not very, very hard, but enough. And I turned to her one day, I said, look, sweetie, I'm studying to become a minister. And why don't we go ahead and stop getting high and drinking and let's get married. And she turned to me and she says, I love you, Marcus, but I don't want to be a minister's wife. She says, I don't know what a minister's wife do, but I know what they don't do. And I respected that because she was always honest and upfront with me. So I told her, I can understand where you're coming from. She ended up going to the Navy and I stumbled, I picked myself back up, but I never had what you would call clean time, being clean and sober. I started to really get into cocaine when I was about 24 years old. I started, never really liked it before, and then crack cocaine came out. And I just to get someone off my case that was always hounding me for a couple months, I finally indulged in some and got hooked. Physiologically, it was something that my body liked. Within about 8 months after that, I got caught in a sting operation over from the Foothill Division, and I got put in prison.
Now, I'm gonna stop you, Marcus. Did you get put in prison because you were using or because you were dealing?
I was using.
Okay.
But what had happened is an individual came looking for some drugs. I thought it was an individual who was just looking for drugs, and I tried to steer them in the right direction to get some.
Okay.
And then, see, I've always been a person that shared. My mother always taught us to share. But I wish I didn't have that kind of thoughtfulness. I pulled in out my pocket because I had some free. I had some that was personally mine, and I offered to smoke it with him. He said no. He says, I need some of this because he's going through the grapevine or something like that. He's making up an excuse that he needed it for later. As soon as I said, he said, because I had it out in my hand, he says, buy that for me for $10. And I reiterated, I said, no, man, we can smoke it for free. Keep your money. He says, but I need it for later. As soon as I said yes, I get grabbed from behind. I look and I see the windbreaker, the blue windbreaker, LAPD on it. So I know. He takes off. I find out later he was an undercover cop. Didn't even know that. Entrapment at that time was no big deal because, it was such an epidemic. There was so many atrocities happening because of crack cocaine. This was my first offense. They offered me 6 years for my first offense. And it was $10 worth of crack cocaine.
Right.
It was a tenth of a gram. I refused it 6 years. Went to jury trial. They found me guilty within moments because now suddenly this officer said it was another officer that was behind the back seat that heard the whole transaction. So I got 2 cops. But like I tell everybody, if I wasn't disobeying God, I wouldn't have disobeyed the laws of the land. So it's on me. It's on me. I shouldn't have been there to begin with.
And I always tell him I think God saved him.
Yes, he did. Yes,
There
he
you
did.
go.
So I lost jury trial. And I was blessed because it was a commissioner, not a judge. And the commissioner said, Mr. Marshall, you have anything to say for yourself? I said, Your Honor. I said, look, I disobeyed the laws of the land and they're all based on God's laws. Whatever the court deems fair, I wanted to accept it because I was wrong. And he said, I appreciate your attitude. I came back 2 weeks later for sentencing. He said, you know what, Mr. Marshall, because it's such a small amount of cocaine, I'm going to give you 3 years. He said, because you learn in 3 years what you learned in 6 years. I said, absolutely. He said 3 years. The DA stood up. He was irate about that because he said, we offered him 6 years. He refused it, took it to jury trial, wasted all the taxpayers' money, and you're giving him half of the original deal? And the commissioner said, yes, absolutely. So I go to prison. While I look around the room, because I was engaged at that time, I looked around the room for my fiance at that time to be with my mother and my sister, and she wasn't there. So about maybe 10 minutes later, they take me out of the courtroom, and in the hallway, they sit me down. She said, can I speak with my client? And they handcuffed me to a chair, and she told me that her name was Gloria. They told me that Gloria was hit and killed by a car a few days prior to me going in. So, and this was something that I wasn't, I'm going to prison for the first time. That's the last thing I expected.
And let me hit you with a little more bad news. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think she was hit by a drunk driver, right?
Well, it was a hit and run. They never found out who it was.
Oh.
And she was under the influence.
Yes. She just came from a gathering of friends at the park. They were having a little engagement party. And we lived within a walking distance from the park. She wanted to walk instead of taking a ride home. So I go to prison and, and I get caught up in a few things coming out when I was released. But what it was, it's really interesting too, because I had parole officers that would violate me immediately. And I asked them one time, because I would do long stretches without, relapsing and going back to drugs and alcohol. And they told me one time, they said, look, the reason why we get so severe on your case is because you're an intelligent man. You have no excuse. These other individuals come through here, they have excuses. You don't. So we're going to get on your case each and every time. And they did.
You are listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information on the podcast, or to reach out if you have a story you would like to share with us, go to our Facebook page by the same name, or you can email us at theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com, or go to our website, theaddictionpodcast.com, or call us at 727-314-7080. And please remember to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a 5-star review. For more information on our sponsor, Narconon Ojai, visit their website at narcononojai.org. That's narcononojai.org. Or call 1-866-231-5924. That's 1-866-231-5924. Sometimes, the hardest thing about getting someone into recovery is getting them to agree to treatment. Bobby Newman, a certified drug counselor with 30 years experience and an over 85% success rate as an interventionist, has created a series of 12 videos that you can use right now to learn every step to get your loved one to agree to treatment. Call 1-833-918-0008 today and say the word podcast to get a 10% discount. Or go to newmaninterventions.com and type in the word podcast for a 10% discount. This service comes with a free 1-hour consultation with Bobby.
I see I see Kathy. I didn't know at the time that she was an alcoholic because she didn't look like it. She was very athletic. She had her act together. I find out that she was an alcoholic. She was drinking, I think it was like vodka or something like that.
This was the second big love of his life.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is in what, 1999, I think it was, 98.
This is the fiance that got killed?
No, second one.
This is a different one. Okay.
This was my girlfriend.
I thought you were the first love, Jeannie, so I'm losing track.
Well, I am. I'm the first, and I'm the last.
Yes.
Okay. There you go. Okay. So this is two after Jeannie. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And within about 30 days of us getting together, we found out that she had cirrhosis of the liver. And my brother is a doctor. He's been a doctor for 30 years. And he told me specifically what it was because she had a large distension in her abdominal area, and he told me that sounds like cirrhosis. And sure enough, it was. She was given 3 years if she doesn't get a liver transplant.
But let me tell you, Marcus, who he is. They had only been dating for about a month, and he stayed with her through this horrifying disease until the day she died 5 years later.
Yeah,
wow.
That's my husband. My husband is like a man of God, but he is a good man. And he won't tell you that. But can you imagine dating? Most people, you date someone for a month and you're like, this is too much. Cirrhosis it was a painful, horrifying death,
Yeah, I'm sure.
So, but he stayed, he took care of her, he supported her, and
she was bedridden the last 4.5 years of her life.
Wow.
But she got clean and sober. I told her, I said, I stopped drinking alcohol if you do. And she did. She stopped for the last 5 years of her life. I was a knucklehead. I sort of indulged about 2 months later. No, I waited 2 weeks before I stopped.
After she died.
No.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I started I stopped smoking a lot of weed because I was doing that. But I stopped drinking about 2 weeks after she stopped. She didn't know. She thought I had stopped drinking as well. And then 2 weeks later, I get arrested for they said being under the influence because I was driving a car and I pulled into a gas station and my license plate, someone had stole my tag off of there. So it was like 8 years old as far as they were concerned. And the officer pulled me over and they found out I was drinking. I passed the test, but they took me into jail anyway. And I took a breathalyzer there, and they found out that, I was barely at the cusp of being drunk. It kept me for about 6 hours. I was released, and when I was walking home, I said, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm done. And the very next day, I quit for 5 years. And then when Jeannie and I got together, I had just started drinking about, I think, 4 years, 5 years, and my house was party central.
But let's back up, because Kathy he stayed sober because he was trying to support her sobriety because she had cirrhosis. So after she died, he picked up a little bit after that. But during that time, he had smoked pot and stuff. So he wasn't clean and sober like we are now, but enough to stay out of prison. He wasn't doing crack, So he was basically, in his eyes, he was sober and he wasn't in prison anymore and he wasn't doing crack. So he was doing great,
I didn't drink for about almost a year after she passed away.
Okay.
And then when Jeannie and I got together, which
So
was
how did you guys
after
get together again? I want to hear that story. How did you get together again?
I had my mother and her best friend in Germany was neighbors, and her best friend came out here to America from Germany, and then my mother followed suit about a year and a half later, and we all lived in the same home. It was a large home in Pacoima, and she had six kids, and my mother had two, my brother, Kinder, and myself. And then my little brother was born. But during that time, we became like a family. They were like, because you got to think about this. We were like the only mixed families in a large, predominantly Black community.
Right.
So we had to band together, as a matter of fact, we had no one else. And what really was surprising is that Siegfried was like my older brother. And Siegfried knew Jeannie.
I dated him before I dated Marcus. I was a lazy dater.
Okay.
You got a cousin? Okay.
Okay.
And I didn't know they were serious ever. I just thought they were just good friends. And, I didn't really think they were boyfriend and girlfriend because he was a man of the world, in a matter of speaking. He was a very mature guy for his age, and he had a lot of friends, female friends.
But Marcus and I dated as a result of him. So
yes.
Okay.
And what he did, he had died. And when he died, I was calling around to see if I could speak with Jeannie.
This was years later, like in 2000 and...
Yeah, Siegfried died in, let's see, what was it?
Like 10 years ago.
Okay. I think it was 2009 or 2010.
10's good.
Yeah. And so I was calling her to let her know, because Siegfried, about not even a year before he died, he had her to call me.
Right.
Okay.
I was talking to Siegfried, and he was he was reaching out to me, Siegfried, for help, and I was talking to him almost every day, and here, and he was gonna move, but he had his own struggles with addiction, and he had ended up getting him and his stepfather struggled over a gun, and the gun went off and killed him.
Okay.
So Marcus was trying to get in touch with me to tell me about Siegfried. And that's how we kind of reconnected over his death, And then Marcus said to me, I said, well, I just hearing his voice again on the phone just brought up all these feelings, and I had just ended my second marriage and in sobriety. And so me and Marcus met for coffee, and, it was like time stood still, we fell back in love. And I just told him, I said, look, this is who I am. I'm sober. Because he looked at me and goes, what's different about you? I go, I'm clean and sober. I've been, because after Marcus, when he proposed to me and, I ran away, skid marks. It was like, no, I don't want to be a minister's wife. I actually was struggling with my own addiction. And I tried to get sober through the Navy. Because I talked to my probation officer, and I said, can I get into the Navy? He's like, sure, let's try, and, for me, it was like one more man to take care of me, Uncle Sam, right?
Yeah.
So, he helped me get in the Navy, and that didn't last long, because turns out that when I was in boot camp, I was pregnant with Marcus's baby. And I lost the baby when I got home, but you can't be, a Navy person. And you can't. In boot camp, they, sent me home. And when I got home, I lost the baby. I never told Marcus until years later. I tried to make amends through my program. And, but, I was pregnant with his child when I went into the Navy. But, so we kind of reconnected, we talked, and, and then within a few weeks, we were, basically back together. And I just told him, I said, look, you don't have to get sober, but this is what I do. Right. And the more I came around his place, the more I saw that he was, his place was like party town. I mean, but like the guys would come over after work and everybody would get drunk and they played dominoes and, and I told, Marcus drank, he smoked a lot of pot. And so he said, well, I don't have to drink. And I said, well, of course not. Anybody can stay sober if they're smoking that kind of weed every day. And, but he did try to stay sober. And
well, actually we met the first time after 33 years, it was January 15th.
Okay.
And my sobriety date is February 22nd, 1 month later.
Okay.
Is my sobriety date. And I never look back. I didn't understand what 12 steps really was. So about a week after I saw Jeannie for the first time, she said, you got to come check out one of the groups. And it was called
Radford Hall.
Well, this was upstairs.
Oh yeah, but
it was called Drop the Rock. And I went upstairs and Drop the Rock is step 6 and 7. I didn't even know what 1 through 5 was. So I'm on step 6 and 7. Right? And I was like, oh, I understand that because it's character defects. And I just replaced character defects with sinful nature. Because from a biblical point of view. So it was easy for me to recognize and understand. And I said, okay, I can work with this. And then I started going to Radford Hall with her about a week after that. And I remember the very first time I said, these people are trying to tell the worst war stories. I'm just sitting here back at this door so I can leave. And that was, of course, my addictive personality at that time. Third time I looked and I said, you know what, these individuals are the most honest individuals that I've ever came across. I said, here I am living a fake facade with everybody, even my family, my siblings, yet these people are being totally honest. I said, you know what? I'm going to try this. And I told Jeannie February 21st, I said, you know what? I'm just going to stop everything. She says, you don't have to stop. Just slow down. I said, I don't understand what that means. I either go 100 miles an hour or I'm at a standstill.
Stop or go, exactly.
Woke up the next morning, February 22nd, and never looked back.
Wow. And you said it'll be how many years this February 22nd? How many years?
He's coming up on 9.
9. That's so well done. Jeannie, you with yours, and Marcus, you with yours. I just know it's not easy, and I really, I just want to validate you for being clean and sober because, it's just not easy. It's not easy for a lot of people, but especially when you've come through what you've come through. So tell us about your newspaper and how that got started and what the purpose is and what you guys are doing. Well,
okay, so, we had a lot of family, like Marcus's family's pretty, my family is different than Marcus's. Mine is, my brother was in and out of jail for 30 years. Then his son came out of prison and stayed with us. Me and Marcus, when we were living together, he started going to college to get a degree in counseling for addiction studies. And while he was there, he had come across some newspapers because I had previously worked on a newspaper, Steps for Recovery. And he came across it and he looked at it and he said, this is incredible. What happened? And I said, well, my business partner, Jason Levin, had died. Me and him were working on it together. He died of natural, he was sober, but because he had used so much cocaine in his past, he had a heart condition. So when he died, I just lost, the family wanted me to take over and run it, but I couldn't, so I just went back to corporate America and I just left it behind. It was too hard. I still think about Jason every day. He was an incredible man. And one of our first issues when we were doing editors columns, I was running what he used to do, what his editor columns from before. So, to kind of pay tribute to him. But Marcus looked at the newspaper, he loved it, and he said, we should do something like this. I said, yeah. It's a lot of work, So, one thing led to another, and, we started this newspaper. And basically what it was is we wanted to be nonprofit. We conducted it, we had it printed in a way that there was no bindery, so there's no staples, so that it can go into hospitals and institutions. And all of it's full of columns, at first it was real heavy alcohol and drugs, but recovery from them, not just, the 12 steps, which Marcus and I got sober through AA, but, it's like a lot of psychology, religion, a little bit of everything, because not everybody gets sober the same way.
Exactly.
And so what we did, we had all these incredible writers, and then eventually we got like a Food for Thought, which deals with eating disorders. We have a Quit to Win, which deals with gambling. We have a Love, we have, Matters of the Heart. We have, now we have Leslie Gold, who does Strides. She believes in the physical training, and she has this incredible company. But, basically what we want to do is do all addictions and disorders, trauma, PTSD, and our newspaper's nonprofit. The way we run it is, we have paid advertisements from treatment centers and from sober livings and from, some regular, handymen and schools advertise. Anybody can advertise. We don't take advertisements from cigarette companies, alcohol companies, or, drug companies. Right. But, that we survive on that. And every issue that we send out, whether we send a private subscription or we do sometimes we send out 50, 100, it's all free. We send out everything for free because we want everybody to be able to read about recovery. And it also addresses people that are in recovery, how to sustain your recovery and the different things people do. And we have, we used to have a social calendar where people could list dances and things like that. And it will come back. But right now we list all the different types of meetings that are available online, all the different types.
That's huge that you give a resource to people in recovery because it's so needed. I don't know if you had listened to any of our earlier episodes, but we interviewed a gentleman named Duke Rumley, who has an organization called Sober AF Entertainment. And they just had a huge Super Bowl party on Sunday that was a completely sober party. And I think that some of those resources are important. And the fact that you guys, but just in spite of that, whether the events are there or not, you guys offer, like a helpline to people. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's huge. So your newspaper isn't online at all, right? It's just printed?
Yes, it is.
Oh, it is. Okay.
No, our primary purpose was to have a printed copy, but yeah, it's online. We have a digital version where people can actually download, and a lot of people don't want to download. So we also have created a version where they can just flip through the pages online.
And where do they go to see that version?
They go to keys-to-recoverynewspaper.com. That's keys, KEYSTO, recoverynewspaper.com. And we also have like a 2-page resource guide that lists all of the 800 numbers for, suicide hotline, for, AA, for everything. Food banks, homeless shelters. But that's, a lot of times when there's open meetings, the meeting people like it because they have a lot of homeless people that show up, and it gives them a resource that they can say, call this number, go here, do that. But the 2 pages, it's 2 solid pages. It's great real estate. It's, a couple $1,000s would have been of advertising that we give every month. And, we're a nonprofit. Our primary purpose is to live with a purpose. You know what I mean? To give. It's a labor of love. I've never taken a paycheck. I have a full-time job that I do and Marcus is like the only sometimes paid employee, Yeah. And, it's like we have a granddaughter that we're enjoying immensely. And, we do, this is a labor of love. We just didn't know it would be 24/7.
And we're very blessed because we started out with 20,000 copies that we distribute throughout the United States. We only had two states outside of Southern Northern California when we started. Now we're up to 37 states.
Right.
Wow.
And we have people as far as Istanbul, Africa, Amsterdam, China, asking for our newspapers, but we're nonprofit and we'll go broke in a week trying to do that.
Yeah, exactly. They can go to the website. All they need is an internet
connection. They go
connection.
online, right? And we have about 200,000 readers a month.
Yes. That's
so
awesome.
We've grown enormously. Yeah, and people love us. It's just, it's our way of getting what we have, and we write an editor's column. I do the top, he does the bottom. We talk about our experiences, our views and our experiences. And, it's Marcus and we have, I believe, like a very blessed relationship with each other. Being married, he's my best friend, he's my business partner, he's my husband, and now we're grandparents together. I had a daughter in early sobriety. I told you about. Wasn't Marcus's daughter. Her dad had 20 years of sobriety. He relapsed and he's homeless. He's been on the streets for about 10 years. One of the women that I sponsor was actually able to get him into a homeless shelter recently. So we're really hoping that it stays. And it's difficult right now with COVID because as soon as someone in the shelter they put them all someplace else. But my daughter has basically grown up without a father. So with Marcus here, I had a second marriage and there was a stepfather, but Marcus has been the grandfather to my daughter's child that she never really had. She never really had a grandfather.
Right.
And so, and Zoe, our little granddaughter, loves, it's just so beautiful how when you get sober and for me, success is about family, it's about love, it's about my mom was scared to death every day I would walk out of the house. Now she brags about me all over the place, tells everybody how wonderful I am, that I'm her little angel, and we live and breathe recovery. I sponsor about 20 women. I used to have a meeting every week in my house, and Marcus would help me set it up and break it down. And now we do it on Zoom until we can be, in person together. But, it's like we live and breathe recovery and hope and God. We believe that we're doing kingdom work, that we're helping lead people away from the darkness of addiction into any type of recovery,
That's awesome. Well, thank you both so much for being willing to be on the podcast and share your story. I know that it's going to resonate with people who are listening, and you've come so far and you're doing so well and giving back so much. So thank you both very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us and giving us a platform where we can maybe get a little more well-known, our newspaper anyway.
I'm sorry. Thank your husband very much as well.
Every time we hear a story of addiction, there's always similarities and then there's always differences. And I like Jeannie and Marcus's stories because definitely there's a story there of hope that they got back together and now they have a grandchild and they're really giving back with their newspaper. Once again, it's keystorecoverynewspaper.com. And if you're looking for resources, you can always check out their website. They said they have a 2-page document that lists all sorts of 800 numbers and resources. If you don't want to do that, you can always call Narconon Ojai at 866-231-5924. It's an anonymous call when you call them. You don't have to give your name. You don't have to tell them whether you're addicted or someone you know is. Just give them a call. Just do something. Reach out. Get help. It's oftentimes the hardest thing to do is to just reach out. So please do me a favor and do it.
You have been listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return, sponsored by Narconon Ojai. For more information on Narconon Ojai, call 866-231-5924 or visit www.narcononojai.org. Narconon is a non-12-step rehabilitation program based on the works of L. Ron Hubbard.